Welcome to this meeting of Council. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded, and the voices and images of those participating in the meeting may be captured as part of this recording. Indigo Shire Council acknowledges the original custodians of these lands. The people of the rivers and the hills have walked these lands for thousands of years as well as today, and we pay respect to the elders of the past and present. As councillors, we have all taken an oath to carry out our duties in the best interests of the people of Indigo Shire and to do this in a fair and impartial manner. We are all committed to exercising the council's powers and functions to the best of our skills and judgment. Do we have any apologies or leaves of absence? None? Item 4 is declarations of conflict of interest. Do we have any conflicts of interest with the agenda tonight? Councillor Landells?
Yes, Mayor Price, I'd like to advise that I'll be declaring a general conflict of interest on some items in item 5 open forum and also 11.3 the planning permit application, PP 230184 for Federation Way, Rutherglen.
Thank you, Councillor. So yes, as you're aware, there are some questions that relate to that in the open forum. So we'll ask you to leave the room at that point and then again when we discuss item 11.3. CEO, you have a conflict?
Madam Mayor, I need to declare a conflict of interest in regards to item 14.2, which is a material conflict of interest as it relates directly to my employment.
Thank you, CEO. We'll now go to open forum. We have quite a few sets of questions. I will confirm, sorry, CEO?
Sorry, Madam Mayor. Can I propose that we change the order of the agenda in light of the large gallery and perhaps in the interest of getting people home early and those driving long distances, which I suspect a lot of them from Rutherglen and Magunya, that we bring forward item 11.3 to be heard earlier before item 11.1.
Thank you, CEO. I think that's a worthwhile suggestion. Can I have a councillor to move a motion to that effect? Councillor Shepherd, you've moved that. Councillor Harvey seconded. All those in favour of bringing that item forward? Carried unanimously. We'll go to open forum. And again, we've got quite a few sets of questions. I will confirm that the person who is asking the questions is in the gallery, and then I'll ask the questions and direct the questions to staff. Annie Turnbull. Thank you, Annie. I can confirm Annie's in the gallery. Last April, I wrote to Council about the plant-based treaty, which supports action to reduce dangerous to our climate methane emissions. I requested Council consider endorsing the plant-based treaty to address methane emissions in Indigo Shire as the first rural council in Australia to do so. As I await Council's response, I ask, does Indigo Shire measure methane emissions using Trellis or any other greenhouse gas tracking system? What is Indigo Shire Council doing to reduce methane emissions in the Shire? Will Indigo Shire Council endorse the plant-based treaty? I'll direct those questions to the Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Thank you. I need to speak into the mic, and I've got the questioner sitting right over my right shoulder. So look, I'll answer each of the questions as I've got them here. So Council tracks the greenhouse gas emissions it produces as an organisation using the Trellis carbon accounting platform, which we've had in place since 2019. So this is done using the CO2 equivalent unit of measurement that translates the impact of various greenhouse gases into a single standard measure. So methane is included in that group of greenhouse gases, but we do not specifically measure methane emissions. So question 2, which was, what are we doing to reduce methane emissions? And the response to that one, Council has committed to becoming a net zero, and in 2021 developed its emissions reduction plan, identifying the actions needed to achieve this target by 2035. So Council is undertaking a broad range of measures to reduce its emissions. This includes all greenhouse gases, not specifically methane. So all relevant actions and information are visible on the Our Climate Action platform on Council's website. Council does not track greenhouse gas emissions produced Shire-wide, nor has it committed to doing so. And there was a third question, if I keep scrolling, and this is about the support for the plant-based treaty. This matter was referred to the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee, IEAC, for consideration, and was tabled at its August 2024 meeting. IEAC was not prepared to recommend the plant-based treaty to council at that time. The topic was raised again at the February 2025 meeting, so just earlier this month. Members of the committee would like to further consider the plant-based treaty before providing any recommendation to council. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. The second set of questions is from Catherine Wall. Can I confirm? Thank you, Catherine. I can confirm Catherine is in the gallery. Question 1. I am writing to you in regard to the Beechworth Railway Precinct that is part of the Murray to Mountains Rail Trail experience. In the recent social media postings on Facebook, Council states that the civic space will be inclusive, innovative nature play, art installation and landscaping elements, as well as a new public toilet block and lighting solutions to improve both the safety and ambience of the precinct. This project is a fantastic opportunity for Indigo Shire Council to develop the site, but I have 2 questions. Can you please advise what community engagement has or will be undertaken by Ben Gilbert, Agency of Sculpture, for the project? I'll direct that question to the Director of Community and Economic Development, Sally Rice. Director, would you like all 3 questions to answer at once? Question 2, regarding the Beechworth Railway Precinct that is part of the Murray to Mountains Rail Trail experience, what is Council's definition of inclusivity for this said project? I'll leave the 3rd question separate. So the Director of Community and Economic Development, Sally Rice.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Price. Ben Gilbert, with other artists and community members, responded to the public expression of interest process and participated in a cultural symposium facilitated by DAE, who are the creative directors engaged to run the artistic process of this project. Input from the symposium informed the creative brief, which was advertised in an expression of interest public process. Ben Gilbert responded to the expression of interest and was selected by the project panel. Ben, with the project team from Tourism Northeast and DAE, with council representatives, held 2 publicly advertised Meet the Artists drop-in sessions in Beechworth to discuss the project with community and gather inputs from them. Further to this, a public survey was conducted to enable further community input. In relation to inclusivity and the aspects of that for this project, in the context of this project, inclusivity addresses accessible public toilet facilities, accessible nature play for children and families of different age groups, skate park for upgrades for teenagers, seating, shade and landscaping for all ages to enjoy, and disabled parking spaces are also included.
Thank you, Director. The 3rd question, can Council please advise if they have been served with any documentation about the Port Hedland motion about immediate suspension of the mRNA COVID-19 vaccines? If they haven't, what is the preferred process to ensure that Council obtains the documents? Director of Community and Economic Development, Sally Rice.
Thank you. I'm aware that in October last year, the council has received correspondence with the subject heading being Port Hedland Council motion to immediately suspend Moderna and Pfizer mRNA style COVID vaccines. Council's position is that COVID vaccinations are a state and federal government public health matter and that the issues raised were outside the remit of local governments. The matter has not been actioned by council staff.
Thank you, Catherine. The next set of questions is from Robin McLeish, and I can confirm that I can see Robin McLeish in the gallery tonight. Question 1, why did Indigo Shire Council prepare an unsuccessful grant application for a mountain bike park shelter when they had previously been made aware of the urgent need for an early learning centre in Beechworth? CEO, these questions are to the Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Thank you, Mayor Price, and I can see Robin in front of me. So I'll answer these one at a time. Council supported an application in late 2023 for funding under the state government's Local Sports Infrastructure Fund for a shelter at the Beechworth Mountain Bike Park. So Council's financial commitment, had the application been successful, would have been $50,000. An early learning centre could not be funded under that program.
Thank you, Director. Question 2, will the toilet block in the railway precinct be constructed to disabled toilet changing room standards? And if so, what is the estimated cost? Again, the Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Thank you. So yes, the toilet block will be built to appropriate standards and be accessible, but it will not contain separate changing rooms. If the question was to refer to the changing places standards, the answer is no, but the design is catered for a future expansion. The total budget is 350,000 and the project is expected to be completed within the available budget.
Thank you, Director. The third question from Robin McLeish. Where did the need for the Beechworth Railway Precinct project originate from? Indigo Shire residents or Tourism North East or Indigo Shire Council? Again, the Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Thank you again. Yeah, look, hard one to give a really clear answer on this. The Beechworth Railway Precinct project has been funded by the state government as part of an $8.5 million package of works for rail trail enhancements on the Murrieta Mountains Rail Trail. So that's across the 3 local government areas. The enhancements package was identified in the North East Victoria Cycling Optimisation NEVCO report back in 2018. The NEVCO report was produced by Tourism North East, but noting that Council CEO sits on its board and also that staff between organisations liaise with each other. So it's difficult to definitively say the need for the project originated with one group or another. The NEVCO report has been in the public domain for a number of years and the state government's funding was only announced in 2022. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Ellett. The rest of the questions relate to item 11.3, Federation Way, Rutherglen planning permit application, for which Councillor Landells, you have declared a conflict of interest. So I will ask you to exit the room as we answer those questions and invite you back in at the completion. The first set of questions is from Jane Campbell. Can I confirm that Jane Campbell is in the gallery? Thank you, Jane. Question 1, has Council considered the implications and taken legal advice on the repercussions that may arise by approving a development on a known water catchment area that has a long history of significant and frequent inundation by floodwaters? By allowing this development, a precedent would then be set for more inappropriate developments. This could leave the Indigo Shire ratepayers exposed to compensation cases being lodged in the future. If the answer is no, could you please explain why? And if the answer is yes, could you please explain the legal advice? I'm going to direct these to the Director of Planning and Corporate Services. Would you like all 3 questions or questions individually, Director?
Probably individually, they're often quite separate.
Yep.
Yes, so thank you. Thanks, Jane. This isn't a decision of Council, this is a decision of VCAT now, so Council hasn't sought legal advice. In addition to this, I'd note that the recommendation to Council is for that Council would have refused this if it had a chance to decide that case. So not a decision of Council and recommended for refusal.
The second question is from Natasha Colleen. Can I confirm that Natasha is in the gallery? Thank you, Natasha. Why did the planning permit application for the 24/7 service station and truck wash located close to Lake Mudamere Wetlands and Nature Reserve only have a 2-week objection period, which is in contrast to neighbouring landholders who have experienced up to a 90-day objection period for applications such as a cellar door, deck extension and a hay shed? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The standard is always 2 weeks. That's in the Planning and Environment Act. We had a quick look before this meeting to see if we could understand the 90 days. Couldn't see that one, but 2 weeks is always a standard. The thought is that there might be a bit of confusion because even though there's a 2-week official window, we always, and councils throughout Victoria, will consider submissions right up to the decision point. So perhaps there was a bit of confusion with that window, but yeah, 2 weeks is what VCAT would support, and it's in the Planning and Environment Act.
The next set of questions is from Prudence Campbell. Can I confirm that Prudence is in the gallery? I can. The first question, how has council evaluated the risks to the waterways leading directly to Lake Mudamere and Sunday Creek and to the vital water supply to the vineyards of many of the key wineries of Rutherglen? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you. Good question. Goes right to the heart of the decision tonight. Council's planning team hasn't been able to complete that risk assessment, and that is the primary reason for recommending to council tonight that the application would have been refused if council had had a chance. So page 28 of the agenda has that and says exactly the proposed development has not adequately considered the flood and environmental risk to the site, and it goes on to talk about the planning aspects of that.
Thank you, Director. The second question, how has council evaluated the complete disruption caused to traffic flow along the Murray Valley Highway and the risks of the congestion at this intersection, all compounded further by the east-west orientation of the Murray Valley Highway at this intersection and the known deaths resulting from this? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The planning system is guided by set rules. The rules in this instance say that the decisions on traffic and intersections is the role of the Department of Transport. So the application was referred to the Department of Transport, and they've come back with some requirements which have been put into the recommended conditions that VCAT has asked for. I think that covers it. It's in another question a little bit later as well.
The third question, what effect does council consider this proposal will have on the vision statement for Rutherglen of the Rutherglen Destination Management Plan created by the Indigo Shire for Rutherglen, which states that Rutherglen will be regarded as a multi-layered, vibrant wine village destination? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
So in these cases, council acts in a very specific role that's under legislation. We need to operate under the Planning Environment Act and do the assessment against the planning scheme. So that particular document and that particular vision statement isn't duplicated in the planning scheme. And so there hasn't been an assessment against that vision statement. And the report that's in the agenda goes through all of the aspects that are relevant in the planning scheme and does an assessment against each of those, but not that one.
The next set of questions are from Robin Pfeiffer. Can I confirm that Robin Pfeiffer is in the gallery? I can. The first question is regarding North East Catchment Management Authority, or NECMA. Has Indigo Shire Council invited an officer from NECMA to attend the forthcoming VCAT hearing to provide expert witness evidence to address questions that VCAT may have as to what will be required by the applicant to respond to flooding at the site selected, including what will be required to stop damage to the environment and groundwater should a major flood event occur, such as the flood event of 2022-23 or major sheet flooding known to be common to the area in question? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
So this one's a little bit procedural, but it's important. These are very critical decisions. At the moment, we only have an officer recommendation to council. Council has not set its position on this application yet. That will happen tonight. After that decision is made, our lawyer will then get into action building the case and the information that's needed for VCAT. That may or may not require expert witnesses, and we'll be guided by the lawyer on that one. I do know that staff have been in touch with NECMA about this case, and we're working closely with NECMA on that. And that's probably about all I can say at this stage because the decision is not made yet. But also as a case that we're about to head into at VCAT, talking about council's strategy for appearing at VCAT's probably not something that I would do in a public live stream forum anyway.
Thank you, Director. The second question relates to the Environment Protection Agency, EPA. On page 54 of the agenda, under item 14.22L02, effluent disposal and water quality, the planner comments states, and I quote, "Due to the size and throughput of wastewater, this site will require a licence from the EPA. Does Indigo Shire Council know what licence conditions the EPA will apply to the above-mentioned application? And will Indigo Shire Council be presenting the EPA licence conditions as advice to VCAT at the upcoming hearing, or will the EPA be presenting these licence conditions on their behalf or through the ISC planner? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
The planning decision is under the Planning Environment Act. The EPA requirements for large septics is under the EPA Act. So they're quite separate. There's a bit of a mention in the report, and sometimes there's conditions, and in this case, there's a recommended condition about that. But it's not necessary for planning to stipulate that it needs a licence. The licence is required under the EPA Act. So quite separate. And the answer is no. We don't know what any future licence that might be, what conditions might be required on a future licence that the EPA would give. So we don't know what those conditions are. And the licence is usually done after the planning permit. So we wouldn't expect to be there representing the EPA's position on the septic.
Thank you, Director. Third question from Robin relates to Indigo Shire Council. On page 87 of the agenda, under item 11.3, under the heading Conclusion, the ISC writes, and I quote, "The proposal does not result in net community benefit and should be refused. Will ISC be represented at the above-mentioned VCAT hearing by Indigo Shire Council planning officers Greg Pinkerton, Director of Planning and Corporate Services, James Turner, Manager of Planning and Statutory Services, Stephen Hawkins, Coordinator of Planning, and Danielle Matthews, Senior Planner, with Indigo Shire Council's representatives to be accompanied by solicitors. Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton."
So depending on the specifics of the case, council's planners sometimes represent council in VCAT. In this case, we've chosen to engage a lawyer to represent council, and as I said before, the lawyer will advise on the best approach to VCAT, and of course, staff as required will be available as and when required.
The next question is from Belinda Chambers. Can I confirm that Belinda's in the gallery? I can. The question 1, VCAT representation. If Indigo Shire Council votes to oppose the 24/7 truck stop on the intersection of Federation Way and the Murray Valley Highway, will it join forces with the Friends of Lake Moodamere in the case before the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal, VCAT? If so, what expert witnesses has the council engaged to report to the tribunal? Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
Council has a really unique role here. Council is a responsible authority under the Planning Environment Act. Therefore, it's we need to operate differently to, say objectors can join forces. Council in this case needs to operate independently and have our own representation in VCAT. So no, we can't join with the Friends group. And then the second part about the expert witnesses is same as the previous answer. Once the decision is made tonight, we'll get on with the case and the specifics, and that may or may not be including expert witnesses.
The last set of questions are from Anne-Marie Christian. Can I confirm that Anne-Marie is in the gallery? Yes, I can. Question 1, this question relates to the planning permit application for Federation Way. Why has the Planning Department interpreted that the service station is permitted in a farming zone under the Indigo planning scheme? It references clause 35.07-1, table of uses appearing in section 2. However, this section refers to a service station built next to a freeway. As this application is not next to a freeway, it should be declined. The service station should then be considered retail, which is declined under section 3 in a farming zone. Director of Planning and Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
The gold star for quoting planning scheme goes to this question. Good to see that. So you're absolutely right. This is not a freeway service station. That's true. But the technicalities of this is that there's 3 sections. 1 is permitted, 3 is prohibited, and section 2 is everything else. And in that section, there's a couple of things listed, say, half dozen to a dozen examples, but down the bottom it says anything else that's not in section 1 or section 3. And there's probably probably 100 or 200 different land uses that are not listed. So what's in there is not a definitive list in section 2, it's just a list of examples. If you have a look at page 38 of the agenda, it just sort of explains that it's captured under the any other use, not in section 1 or 3.
Question 2. While acknowledging that Vic Roads are the responsible authority for the road plan, why has the Shire not advocated for a roundabout at this dangerous intersection, which has had a number of fatalities? Why is a roundabout built at the developer's expense not one of the draft conditions to ensure public and resident safety? Director of Planning Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
As I said before, the road treatments, the intersection treatments in this particular case goes to the Department of Transport. Both of those roads are state roads, and the department is the correct place for that to be done. And that's acknowledged in the question. I understand that. As far as why council isn't offering an opinion, road traffic engineering is a very specific science that's done by clever engineers who have the data, who have the accident statistics, who work in a team of engineers. And so it's not really the place of council to propose traffic lights or roundabouts or other treatments. It really should be done by the responsible authority that is accountable for road safety on public highways. And that's what we've done. And they've come back with the treatments that are in the draft conditions.
The last question from Emery Christian is, this development will cross the cycling and pedestrian path at 2 places. Why has the council not requested in its draft conditions that the developer relocate the bike path to the other side of the Murray Valley Highway to ensure public safety? Director of Planning Corporate Services, Greg Pinkerton.
So at the moment, it would go past to relocate that to the other side of the road would avoid crossing 2 driveways where cars and trucks are travelling in and out of the service centre. But to relocate it onto the other side of the road would require that the cyclists go across a busy highway and then go down a bit and go across a busy highway to get back. So that doesn't seem like a step forward with safety. When doing rail trails, and I'm speaking for my colleague here at the moment, we try and make it the best appropriate path that we can, and avoid road crossings and busy driveways where we can, but you simply can't avoid all of them. So rail trails will, by definition, go past businesses and go past driveways. And in this case, asking cyclists to cross over twice to avoid the driveways wouldn't be a step forward. Thank you. Thank you for all your questions.
That's the last question of our open forum. We'll get Councillor Landells back in the room. If the open forum part of the meeting was the only part that you wanted to be here for, you're more than welcome to leave. Otherwise, I know that lots of you are interested in items coming later in the agenda and more than welcome to stay. We'll now go to item 6, community and council achievements, and we wanted to acknowledge some people that have received awards from the Australia Day Honours List for 2025. We have with us tonight Mrs. Irene Mary Cracknell, who received an Emergency Services Medal for significant contribution and dedication to the Rutherglen SES. Councillor Horn, I know that you wanted to say some words in support of having Irene here tonight.
The 2025 Australia Day Honours List recognised Rutherglen resident Mrs. Irene Cracknell with a very prestigious award, the Emergency Services Medal, or ESM as it is known, to outrank the OAM she was presented with in 2023 and also other recognition for her work as a Justice of the Peace. The ESM, a national award, was instituted in 2011 and recognises distinguished service, dedication and professionalism across a raft of state and voluntary emergency services across Australia to those involved in emergency management, training or education. It is awarded to those, sorry, I just pushed the wrong button. It is awarded to those who are the pillars of their communities, who have made very significant, sustained contributions over decades. In Irene's case, she was recognised for 43 years of continuous service after becoming the first female active member when she joined the SES in 1982, sorry, not 2082. And gathered a number of awards, such as the National State Emergency Medal in 1997 and the SES Long Service Medal in 2004. While we've been tucked up into our beds, she's been out there assisting with road crashes, floods and storms, controlling and coordinating the crews dispatched to clear fallen trees, dispense sandbags or directing operations for land searches. As if that isn't enough, Irene is highly respected as a founding committee member and treasurer of the Indigo Shire Council Aturo Island Friendship Group, which fundraises to support Aturo Island students with their university studies, as well as providing compostable toilets, community gardens and other local projects. Irene is also a life member of the Indigo North Health Board and also the honorary auditor of Neighbourhood Watch. Ladies and gentlemen, please join us in congratulating Irene on her remarkable achievements as she makes her way to the lectern to share a few words with us.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. This is quite embarrassing, really, because you don't volunteer to be recognised for your service. I've done it because I've loved doing it. I like helping people, and I'll keep going as long as I can, which probably won't be too much longer, but anyway. Thank you very much for that. It's been my pleasure.
You're very, very welcome.
Thank you, Irene, for your service. We'd like to get a photo with you as well, so that we can acknowledge you further for your service. Thank you so much for letting us recognise you tonight, Irene. We really appreciate your strong volunteerism in your community. I know that it's very well regarded in the Rutherglen community, and as I say, we're just so pleased to be able to recognise you here tonight in the council chamber. We all really value your efforts and are pleased to see you recognised with such an award. We'd also like to mention Mrs. Jodie May Goldsworthy, who we also invited along tonight, but unfortunately she couldn't make it. She was awarded the Member of the Order of Australia for significant service to primary industry, particularly the honeybee and pollination sector. So we would also congratulate her on those efforts. Item 7 is condolences. And we would like to raise a condolence for John Hammond. John Hammond was a councillor from Chiltern, as well as from the Chiltern Shire, as well as prolific community volunteer for decades across many organisations, including CFA, Legacy, Chiltern Cemetery Trust, National Trust, St Joseph's Primary School Board, Chiltern Water Board. He was a proud veteran of 2 wars, Vietnam and Korea, and a regular at the Chiltern Anzac Day March. John was possibly most fondly remembered as a much-loved Santa Claus at many community celebrations. Generations of Chiltern residents remember him fondly as the kindest and most jovial Santa who entertained them as children, then their children, and even their children's children. John and Lorraine were married for 64 years. He was a great family man, husband, father, grandfather, and great-grandfather. And he was certainly contributing to Indigo Shire Council right up until the later stages. Most recently in our rates policy discussion, he was a member of our community group. It was so beautiful to see the Chiltern community all put up their photos of all the different generations of children as part of him being Santa, as sort of a memorial to him. So we will send a letter under seal to his family, CEO, passing on our condolences. We'll now move to item 8, confirmation of minutes from previous meetings. The recommendation is that the following minutes be confirmed. Minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of December 2024, as published on council's website. And 2, confidential minutes of the council meeting held on the 10th of December 2024, as provided to councillors under separate cover. Do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the item?
No, thank you.
Councillor Dowsley?
No, thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the item? All those in favour? Councillor Harvey, can I just confirm you've raised your hand? Carried unanimously. Item 9 is business arising from previous minutes, and there was one question that was taken on notice and is listed with the response in the agenda. Item 10 is petitions. CEO, can I confirm there are no petitions? Thank you. Item 11 is planning and corporate services. And councillors, we moved a motion earlier to bring item 11.3 forward to this point in the agenda. So item 11.3, planning permit application PP 230184 Federation Way, Rutherglen. Councillor Landells, you have a conflict of interest. Would you like to announce your conflict of interest, please?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Councillor Mayor Price. I have a general conflict of interest with this item due to my involvement in the Save Lake Moodamere campaign in relation to this planning permit. This occurred just prior to my running for council. And over the past month, I've had a chance to reflect on my position, and I believe that my bias is stronger than I had thought when I was first elected to council.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. I now ask you to leave the room while we debate this item, and we'll invite you back in at the completion. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that 1, pursuant to section 84(1) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987, if council had been given the opportunity, it would have issued a notice of decision to refuse to grant a planning permit for the use and development of land at 2804 Federation Way, Rutherglen, for a service station, removal of native vegetation, create access to a Transport Zone 2 road and signage on the following grounds. A, the proposed development has not adequately considered the flood and environmental risk to the site as required by the following clauses of the Indigo Planning Scheme. 02.033 Environmental Risks and Amenity, 13.031S Floodplain Management, 13.031L Floodplains and Rural Drainage, and B, the proposal is not consistent with the purpose, statement of environmental significance, environmental objectives, and the decision guidelines of the Environmental Significance Overlay Schedule 3. 2. Council notes the set of draft conditions provided as an attachment to this report, and A, the preparation of these conditions is a requirement placed on Council by the Tribunal and does not indicate Council's support for the permit application, nor does it indicate compliance with the conditions results in an acceptable outcome from Council's point of view, and B, Council officers will be updating the draft conditions as necessary, having regard to the evidence and submissions received in the course of the Victorian Civil and Administrative Tribunal VCAT hearing. C, the final decision on this permit application, including the decision to either issue or refuse a permit and the drafting of any conditions, is a decision for VCAT. Could I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd.
Goodness, this is a huge document that I've read a number of times and have also read the I'd say over 100 submissions we've received. 80 something I think was in the report, but I think I've had 20 or so, maybe more since that was raised, since this document was raised. So over 100 people have given their feedback, and really, I think the line in the conclusion of the document that says the proposal does not result in net community benefit and should be refused is basically sums up all that the community has been saying around their concerns, that when you weigh it all up, it is not of any benefit to the community to have that there in their space, with all of the different things that were raised. As in the report, our planning department says the proposal raises a number of issues, including suitability in the farming zone, environmental issues, including vegetation removal and impact on fauna, road safety issues, impacts on businesses in the area, including surrounding wineries, impacts on water quality in Lake Mudamere and flow on impacts to irrigation water, flooding and overland flows, amenity for the local residents. And I'd also, I think, which I don't think is raised in here, but a number of people have said in their submissions, the whole idea that we are a heritage, that area is a heritage winery area, that we've just spent 5.7 million on a cycle wine loop around that region. And we have declared that area to be important for us for tourism, that it also does not really fit into our tourism strategy to have that in that space. I know that from a planning perspective, we have a lot of weight put on our environmental overlay, the Black Dog Creek overlay, which says, if I could say, the objective to be achieved is to maintain the quality of water within the catchment, which is one of the most important things that everybody has said, including the planning department and the councillors and all the submissions, to maintain the quality of water within the catchment, to prevent buildings and works from impeding the flows of water within the Black Dog Creek catchment, which this is in, and maintain its ability to carry natural flows, including floods, and to provide a framework to assist in decisions regarding drainage works within the catchment. So very important words, and I imagine they are going to be where we're going to be able to make the most arguments around the importance and the fragility of our waterway, which is this is right on the edge of a very important vulnerable waterway with, as we know, a lot of vulnerable species, and the fact that that we have sustainable wineries pumping from that area, which I imagine would create concerns for them. So I think it's important that we look at all those other aspects as well as the environmental issues. I also think we can easily be looking, as the community have stated, that is this an appropriate development in the farming zone? Is this safe? Even though I know we were told that it's out of our hands, but I mean, if you have to go past the service station and you've missed the turn off and you have to make a left-hand turn into it, of course you're going to make a U-turn to approach that service station. And is that safe? I still think it's something we need to talk about, even though it's the Transport Authority's role. I still think it's a safety role for us. So I really support and thank the Planning Department on the work they've done on being able to give us some grounds for this not going ahead, because it just isn't appropriate. And as I said, as it's all weighed up, it is not the right development in that important space.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I'd like to reinforce what Councillor Shepherd has stated in great detail and quite well. Would like the community to be aware that we have agonized over this and discussed this ad infinitum, not only for hours, but days and even weeks. And I hope everyone understands the legal constraints that we're in. Like the final sentence, it is VCAT's decision, not ours. The matter was taken out of our hands through no fault of ours. And our planning officers have done a very good job in letting us know on what legal grounds we can't object to it. Now, all those other things are very nice, but we have to work within certain legal requirements. So I'd like to support and hope that maybe VCAT might deny the application. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
I do support the motion as put, but I have grave concerns around potential road safety and traffic issues generated by the proposal because of its impact on the Rutherglen Road network. While I understand that both the Murray Valley Highway and Federation Way are arterial roads under the management of the Department of Transport, and that the Council has little input into traffic matters in this application, it's important to acknowledge that road safety is a fundamental right and is just one of the paramount concerns expressed by people from across the region and beyond, who hope and pray that this application would be rejected by VCAT. This always busy intersection already has a very heavy workload, particularly with the movement of heavy vehicles. It has been identified as a black spot site, and perhaps most importantly, has recently been incorporated into the family-friendly Rutherglen Loop cycle track. I'm pleased to see that the Department of Transport have considered the proposal's access and egress arrangements and have required measures and treatments along with the production of an approved road safety audit before this use can commence. To ensure the safety of all road users, this facility would require the construction of a roundabout at this intersection to effectively control the traffic. I believe that the Department of Transport should insist that road safety is the developer's responsibility and ensure, if the application is successful, it is done to the satisfaction of the local authority, Indigo Shire Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I would like to acknowledge the many community members who have contacted me and my fellow councillors in regards to this planning permit application. I fully support my fellow councillors' statements regarding concerns with adverse environmental impacts and road safety. Therefore, I won't reiterate those sentiments. Tonight, I will use my time to focus on amenity. Our rich history, vibrant community and breathtaking landscapes make Indigo Shire one of a kind. Rutherglen is known for its world-class wineries, culinary excellence, gold rush history, beautiful environment, events and outdoor activities. I'm deeply concerned about the impact this development will have on the visual amenity of the area, and I believe that, should VCAT approve the proposal, it must respond in a more sensitive way to its rural setting. If approved, I would urge VCAT to include permit conditions requiring plans be amended to show more meaningful landscaping, improvements to the built form, including treatment to the canopy, the inclusion of articulation to the kiosk building, better activation of the kiosk's western and southern elevations, and the use of a more muted tones throughout the development. However, that being said, I believe the establishment of a service station on the subject land would result in a detrimental change to the character of the site and the surrounding properties and should be refused by VCAT.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Burke.
Yes, thanks. I concur with Councillor Dowsley's comments there. The issues around the water catchments and all those things are an absolute given, and I support the views on that. I'd add to the point from a very self-interest point of view that it's just disappointing to see the designs of the buildings. I'm not supporting that there should be one there at all. Shouldn't have a service station, but even the designs don't match the characteristic of the area. It's a farming zone. It's a heritage winery region, and yet the designs look like a typical city service station. I moved away from there 4 years ago from the city. I want to be in the country. I want to be in a heritage winery area. Developers should just try harder to match what the community needs are. So I fully support the other councillors and looking forward to VCAT's rejection.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. I'd also like to say a few words on this item. This item has taken a considerable amount of our time, considering we will not be the decision makers, considering this item was taken out of our hands as swiftly as it could be. I'm critical of that process in the first instance, that we were never going to be able to entertain this application. We were never going to be able to be the decision-making authority in this instance because the applicant was able to take us off to VCAT for failure to determine such a complex application in such a short time frame. So I'm very critical of the process in that regard. I want to say to the community, we have read every email, we've read every comment, we have appreciated all of the feedback, all of your phone calls and your thought that has gone into writing submissions. We have reflected all of that feedback and very critical questioning through to our staff and really insisted that they answer each of our questions and provide us with a response as to why things could or couldn't be included in refusal grounds, or if they couldn't be, how they could be accommodated in conditions if, and we do not want this to happen, this application was going to be approved at VCAT. It's a really strong case for refusal for the grounds that the planners have listed, and I think that that is our responsibility as the planning authorities to be really clear about those grounds. And I'm pleased that the planners have been able to provide us such strong grounds. But I think that we have two roles in this space. We're the planning authority, but we're also community representatives, and we are here to represent our community. And I know that VCAT won't take that into account in terms of refusal, but I think that VCAT should take into account the cumulative effect of lots of the concerns that the community raise, whether it is the environmental concerns raised by Councillor Shepherd, or other road safety concerns and amenity concerns raised by Councillor Horn or Dowsley. We have visited that site a number of times to assess what that would look like at that site. And for all of the reasons that have been made clear to us by the community, it should be so strongly refused. It is not a suitable activity in that site. And as we stood there with trucks whizzing past it from every direction and fully realising why the road toll on that intersection is the way that it is, because it is so dangerous, the idea that we would put a service station on the corner there to add to that activity along that section was just baffling. So, as I say, you can hear from the discussion tonight, we believe that this is a really strong grounds for refusal. And we have given all of that indication to our staff that that is exactly the case that should be represented at VCAT. I'll now return to Councillor Shepherd for summing up.
I think you've done that, haven't you? Didn't you just sum up? You've just done my job. Hey? Okay, go again. Well, look, the other thing that I've been thinking about, the thing about the inland rail and the freight that's going to be going on there. And you know, we're a council that always want to be 2 steps ahead, and we try to be innovative and think and plan ahead and be a bit strategic. And I just think to myself, is this just old stuff? Putting an old service station that looks the same as everything else in Melbourne stuck on a corner. Is this just old when we are supporting climate emergency, you know, good waste management, you know, recycling, water management. We're just in the middle of doing an environmental significant development plan. You know, like that's where we want to go, and this does not sort of fit in that space. And so that's just a sort of final full stop on all those great comments that we've had from the community, and thank you from the councillors. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. So I'll put it to the vote. The item is a notice of decision to refuse if we had been the planning authority. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. We'll now get Councillor Landells to return to the chamber. Item 11.1 is the 2024-25 Q2 forecast financial report. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 adopts the Q2 forecast for both operating, as shown in the operating statement below, and capital, as shown in the attached capital works monitor, and 2, directs the Chief Executive Officer to report against these forecast figures for the remainder of the financial year. Do I have somebody to move a motion?
I move that motion, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Burke?
And move the motion as per the recommendation with one amendment, an addition of bullet point 3, which reads, directs the CEO to continue to display the original full year budget as a separate column in the income statement and summary capital work statement in the monthly financial report to Council.
So that is the motion. Councillors, those words have been circulated. If you'd like them repeated, we can repeat them. Otherwise, I'll ask for a seconder. Seconded by Councillor Horn.
Foreshadow that if this doesn't get up, that we go back to the original motion.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Burke, you've moved the motion. Would you like to speak to the motion?
Okay, thank you. This motion relates to the 2 most important council financial reports, being the Capital Works Monitor and the budget. Right now, our council is tracking around 120 projects using an Excel spreadsheet with thousands of data points. It's slow and prone to errors and therefore inhibits transparency. As with all Excel spreadsheets, I expect staff who are working really well on this project, but they'd be spending too much time on data entry and fixing spreadsheets instead of analysing results and reporting on outcomes. We need a modern system with real-time updates, automatic reporting and clear tracking of spending and progress. I don't know of other councils, but using the principles of best practice, surely somewhere in Victoria's 78 other councils, there is a smarter, more efficient tool. We should find it and use it. In the meantime, we need to make whatever improvements we can in the Capital Works Monitor to improve the transparency in our Capital Works program. But improving reporting is just one piece of this puzzle today. Budgets are the backbone of accountability and responsible governments. They are not just numbers, they reflect our commitment to the Shire community. A well-managed budget ensures every dollar aligns with community priorities by tracking financial performance. We can address risks early, protect the Shire's financial health, and avoid unnecessary rate rises. Budgets should not be seen as barriers, but as tools that empower better decision-making. They help ensure funds go where they matter most, to essential services, parks, local infrastructure, and other priorities of our community. Transparency is key. Our council plan that we're working on now invites community engagement, giving residents a clear voice in how their money is spent. Our budget represents that voice. An informed community leads to better governance and stronger accountability. And that's why the administration should be having the budget included in future financial reports to ensure every dollar is spent wisely for a stronger Shire.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Shepherd, do you have a question?
I do. Councillor Burke, I agree with all of that about transparency, about budget, but I'm just unsure how you've explained. Could you explain to me why we need number 3 in? Because I don't think your explanation points to why number 3 will do all that you think perhaps isn't already happening, which I think it's happening pretty well, but I'm interested in what number 3 will do to make it more transparent and make it a better budget and the other points you raised.
Well, I'm just having I want to confirm, I want to make sure that the budgets remain there at all times. So rather than just expecting it to be there, I'd like there to be a directive for it to be there.
If I could ask another question. So we at this particular time, we reassess our budget as per what is realistically happening so that it does reflect more for the community to see exactly how the money is being spent. So I'm just unsure, again, why number 3 will make this a better process. Why having that old budget figure there will make a difference? Look, I'm up for it. I just really, it's a bit something I haven't heard or thought of.
So P2 is the updated forecast based on a point in time at the end of November with December adjustments in there. So that changes the numbers to what we're comparing things to. We had a view at the start of the year to say that what a budget would look like, and we should go back and be able to refer to that if we need to. And yeah, there is an explanation in the P2 report submission, which does show the variances, but I think we should be able to do that on an ongoing basis or ad hoc basis during the year. And that's why the budget reports should be beside the P2 reports.
I'll now go to the seconder of the motion, Councillor Horn. Would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm very appreciative of Councillor Burke's input into this situation, and I agree with his suggestion.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also supportive of the suggested amendment. I would like to make a motion for a further amendment.
So currently we have a motion, so you would like to move an amendment, councillor Dowsey?
Amendment to the amendment, yes.
No, there's no more amendment. It was moved as a motion, so you would like to move an amendment.
Yes, please.
What is your amendment?
My amendment would be an additional fourth dot point, which would state that we direct the CEO to adjust the Capital Works Monitor report to include budget at completion, which would be the original budget for the total project, estimate at completion, which would be the total forecast for the project, the completion date, which would be the original completion date that we first stated to the community, and the forecast completion date.
I'm just going to check that that's been captured. Thank you. At this point, I'll ask if the mover and the seconder are happy to incorporate that into the original motion.
Yes, I do.
So both the mover and the seconder.
Yes, I do too.
So both the mover and the seconder have indicated that they're happy to incorporate the fourth point as read out by councillor Dowsey into the motion to make sure that councillors have all of the information that is now in front of them. Now that there's been 2 adjustments to the recommendation, both items have been emailed so that you can refer to them, but we can also go back to them if people would like it read out again. So that remains the motion. Can I just check with our governance coordinator, at this point in the debate, the mover has spoken to the motion and the seconder has spoken to the motion before this item was adopted into the motion. Should I continue with the debate or return to the mover to begin the debate again?
So under Rule 61F of the governance rules, it does indicate that a second or subsequent amendment cannot be moved until the current amendment has actually been finalised.
So we've finalised the current amendment. We've adopted it into the motion.
Yep.
So in terms of the debate, we will just continue with where we're up to in the debate.
That's right, yes. If the amendment is adopted, then it becomes a substantive motion. That's my statement.
Thank you. Councillor Dowsey, I'll go back to you to speak to the motion.
Thank you, Mayor. The Capital Works Monitor report shows us budget movements since the 1st of July 2024 and the actual spend to date. What this report doesn't currently tell us is the original budget of each project at inception and the original completion date. The report commentary suggests the Capital Works program is break even. However, this has only been achieved by pushing budgeted projects out to 25-26 to cover budget overruns in 24-25. Of the 110 to 120 odd projects listed on the report, 41 projects are proposed to have either a partial or full carry forward into 25-26. The commentary suggests that this is normal practice for large projects that often span multiple financial years. I would suggest if projects are scheduled to span multiple years, then they should be budgeted as such from the commencement. The commentary also suggests a favourable budget variance of $60,000. This can only be viewed in the light of 37% of projects running over schedule and an unknown number of projects running over original budget. Although I accept some of these variances are a result of new grant funding responding to emergency events like the storms we've been experiencing, or other conditions outside of our control, some of these variances are undoubtedly a result of scope change and/or scope creep. As a council group, we deserve the chance to question these changes to scope and whether changes provide fair and equitable spending across our communities prior to the funds being allocated. I think we need to do better, and I think we can be more transparent in our performance, and I think that these changes will enable us to do both.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsey. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, I'd like to support the motion because I think it goes a long way to creating more transparency. We're always talking about council has to be transparent. And I think this would help the community understand exactly how we do our budgets and our finances. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd.
While I appreciate both of these amendments to the original motion, I really would have appreciated an opportunity for our staff, I suppose, to give feedback on those two areas. It sounds good. They both sound like good options to add, but again, I'd really like to hear from the finance department and from our CEO as to whether these changes will give us the transparency that both of these councillors seek. And is it going to be onerous to do this, or is it something we can easily fit into our scope? CEO.
Thanks for the question, councillor. Through you, Mayor Price. I think the comments are fair and reasonable. I'm certainly a strong supporter and believer in openness and transparency, and I think any extra information is always powerful. So I'm supportive of that information. I haven't consulted with my staff as to how much extra work, which whether the fine tuning about what exactly was the start date of a project or the agreed completion date of a project. A lot of them are, original milestones are set by a grant provider, which is like an ultimate deadline, and yet we'll put stuff in the budget, which is actually an earlier deadline than the grant provider provides. So, there'll be different versions of what the completion date was, but that's okay. We'll work through that detail later on. I don't see that once you put the numbers in the spreadsheet, then they stay there for the whole term. So, I don't see too much extra work, and I'm quite happy to accept that extra work. It just means the report itself has more columns, and finance is already accused of being secretive by having too many columns and therefore making the font smaller, which is not an attempt to make it harder to read, but just trying to cram as much information as we can. And to me, the more information, the better. But as long as we can keep trying to display it and make it readable, then I'm happy to support it.
And I look forward to hearing from the two councillors with these changes. I look forward to hearing them be able to reflect, when these changes are done, reflect how these are making a difference to their concerns they have about transparency. So both of you, I'll be watching what you're going to be talking about.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd like to say I take my responsibility for responsible decision making really seriously, and although I appreciate the amendments and I understand that that's new councillors using a function that they are absolutely should utilise, I think that to me we need to have a discussion about how budgeting in local government compares to other sectors, and understand why our staff come to us with these accounting standards, and why they are not just good practice but best practice, because that's my understanding with what we've been presented, is that this is a really good standard. I'm interested in the idea around transparency and what these columns add. I'm not sure that I understand Councillor Burke's point and what that will add, but again, similarly to Councillor Shepherd, I look forward to that discussion, because we can add many columns, but if they don't add to useful discussion, and if they don't do what they intend, then it's just more work that we're asking staff to do without result. Similarly, Councillor Dowsley, with the suggestions that you've made, in the time that I've been here since 2016, the Capital Works report has come to us with minimal columns, and then we have directed the staff to come back to us with many more columns, because what information are we missing out on? Where's this particular piece of information? And then we get to about 32 columns, and then we say to the CEO, how do you expect us to read this? We cannot glean anything from this. It's not transparent. We can't utilise this document. So I welcome you using this amendment to find that balance. But I would also say council staff are very receptive to that discussion, and I've not had to move an amendment to achieve that outcome. And in terms of the way that we budget, I think that this is the most appropriate way for us to reflect our spending. We are so grant dependent that we could be totally misrepresenting a budget if we just continue to refer back to the budget, because we might have allocated an enormous amount of money for a small rural shire to a grant that we did not receive, or similarly we might not have factored in a grant that we did receive, and so that's why I'm really confident in the process that is the Q2 forecast. And even in the background document itself, in one of the paragraphs says outlines the process, which says the process required for the Q2 forecast is an extensive one in which budget managers review all expenses in their budget as at the end of November and adjust for any savings, changes in plans or new projects. This is then reviewed by Council's executive team where further adjustments and efficiencies targets are usually made. The revised budget is then reviewed by the Finance Committee on the way to being presented to a Council meeting for consideration. The Q2 forecast then becomes the basis for future financial reporting so that monthly variances are not clouded by any large abnormal items that often occur in the first half of the financial year, which is usually due to grant timing and carry forwards. So I think that we've taken the right approach in welcoming your amendments and your feedback on how we can continue to report better to the community. But I would say that we have a very high level of reporting at the moment. And certainly any questions that we might have for the staff around that reporting, how that works, figures, projects, they're certainly happy to accommodate. I'll now go back to Councillor Burke as the mover, if you'd like to sum up, Councillor Burke.
Oh, I think we've done it to death. I would say that by ensuring that the budgets are always there, it will just keep that focus. And maybe it was, that's fine. And I think adding those extra dates within the capital works program. I get a lot of questions from the community around dates of projects. So if it was already there, or we don't need to do it, we'll find that out during over the next 12 months or so. I'm certainly not of the view of complexity for the sake of more. Quite the opposite. Smaller, simpler is better, but not at the cost of important information. So, so we'll see how this goes.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. So before I put it to the vote, I'll just make sure that everyone's clear what we're voting on. The motion is the recommendation as listed in the agenda with the inclusion that Councillor Burke noted and the inclusion that Councillor Dowsley noted that was incorporated by the mover and seconder. So I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Those against? Motion is carried. We'll have all those in favour again. Councillor Harvey, Horn, Dowsley, Price, Shepherd, Burke. Those against? Councillor Landells. The motion is carried. Item 11.2 is the Emergency Services and Volunteers Fund. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 calls on the Victorian Government to A, revise the new Emergency Services Volunteer Fund and reduce the tax burden for ratepayers by lowering the increase to a reasonable increase that is aligned to CPI, remove the requirement for local councils to collect this tax on behalf of the state government, confirm that the tax is collected from Indigo Shire residents will be used for the benefit of local emergency service organisations, and 2, authorises the CEO and Mayor to advocate for this position. Do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. The state government continues to cost shift to local government and the wider community via new and increased taxes, levies and charges. The Standing Committee on Regional Development, Infrastructure and Transport's interim report into local government sustainability notes the role of local governments has expanded exponentially beyond the 3 Rs: rates, roads and rubbish. They have increasingly been relied upon to deliver services and infrastructure which were traditionally under the purview of the Commonwealth, state and territory governments. Further, local government financial sustainability and funding frameworks were being impacted by evolving infrastructure requirements, service delivery obligations and cost shifting. The increase of this levy during a cost of living crisis, in addition to its collection on rates notices, is entirely inappropriate and further compromises the financial sustainability of our ratepayers and council.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Shepherd.
I think what is upsetting councils around Victoria is the fact that we are all under a rate cap notice, and we are being very aware of every cent we're spending of ratepayers' money and having to budget tightly, and yet the state government is going to put 100% is an increase in this fee that we have to then implement will go on the rate notices, which we absolutely know that the community is going to think we've done that, that it's our fee, and we will have to answer the phones and explain. We are the ones that are going to have to work out who are the people that are exempt, and we just don't have the IT or the people to do that work. And as per the report, the state government has exactly the same list of ratepayers that we have. They could very easily be doing this themselves and owning this tax. The other thing that I find confronting is that we don't know what it's going to be spent on. They say it's on a wider range of emergency services, but if it's coming from this region, is it coming back to our region? It's a question that is they haven't answered any of that yet. So I can see it's really an advocacy job for you, Mayor, and for the CEO, and I'm happy to second this motion and ask you to certainly raise this with the powers that be.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells?
Yes, we're just concurring the points that have been raised. I think that given the current financial stresses on household budgets, that this levy should be reviewed and sort of aligned, I guess, with CPI. So, and the other point is about how it's collected, who collects it. I think the state government should take responsibility for its own collection of state-introduced levies.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I certainly would. Mayor Steve Raby from Mansfield Shire Council contacted me about this. They were putting it on their council agenda. He knows that I'm the representative for Rural Councils Victoria that covers Mansfield Shire Council. They've put forward a compelling case at their council meeting. They'll be doing similar advocacy. This has, following his meeting, there's been a number of councils who have done the same thing, including Wodonga Council only last night. And it's really obvious exactly what should happen here, and that is that the state should collect their own taxes. They should not impose a tax of theirs on a different level of government. We've just talked about responsible decision making. I just referenced that in a previous decision. How is it responsible decision making to impose a tax be collected by local governments who are rate capped at 3% increases when the state government just does a 50% increase to this levy and tax it onto our rate notices? Were we consulted? No. Do we have a say in the matter? No. Is it appropriate? No, it's not. And this is being heard far and wide. All of the councils are in agreement. We just can't believe that the state government would ask us to do such a thing when they understand how financially constrained we are and how financially responsible we are being Just because they might not be similarly being financially responsible doesn't mean that they should then defer to us to collect their taxes. So I look forward, CEO, to advocating on this issue to the Hume Region Local Government Network, to MAV State Council, through Rural Councils Victoria, and perhaps we might mention it on the steps of Parliament next week when we go to advocate to the state government on another issue which they are not listening to us on. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to the mover, Councillor Dowsley.
Nothing further, thank you.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.4 is planning permit application PP 230153, Cook Lane, Stanley. The item is for decision. The recommendation is a page and a half long. So, councillors, I'm going to assume that you have read that. I don't intend on reading that other than to say that this is a recommendation for refusal, and there are 6 paragraphs that set out the following grounds. Can I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey.
No, I think it's self-explanatory. I did discuss it with the planner briefly a week or so ago, and I think we're on solid ground refusing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, I agree. This is land. This is land in the farming zone. It's not zoned or service a residential or rural residential use. We don't like to give people an expectation that lots below 40 hectares will be able to develop dwellings. There's an existing agricultural use on the land. It's a chestnut, highly intensive chestnut farm. And really, as far as is reflected from the application, there's no real need to have residential a house on it. And in doing so, it will take some of the chestnuts away from the agricultural use. So, no, as you said, it is a strong grounds for refusal.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley?
I'd just like to concur with my fellow councillors. I don't believe that the proposal has demonstrated how a proposed dwelling will support and enhance the existing agricultural activity on the site, and therefore should be rejected.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Harvey. Would you like to sum up?
No, thank you. I think we said it all.
Thank you, Councillor Councillor Harvey. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.5 is planning permit application PA 24010935 Bridge Road, Beechworth. The item is for decision. The recommendation is almost 2 pages long, so I don't intend to read it out other than to say that the recommendation is that council, having considered the application, resolves to issue a notice of decision to grant a planning permit for a 2-lot subdivision in the general residential zone at 35 Bridge Road, Beechworth, subject to the permit conditions below. The permit conditions are under headings such as approved subdivision, removal of buildings, agreements with relevant authorities, easements, referral of plan of subdivision, mandatory telecommunications, vehicle access, drainage and expiry date. As I said, they're about 2 pages long. I will ask, will somebody move that motion, please? Moved Councillor Burke, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak to the motion?
I support these sorts of planning decisions. When I looked at the site, it seemed to be a perfect opportunity for infill, and yeah, I support it.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, I concur. It's just very sensible governance. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any of the council like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley?
Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge the community members that submitted objections for this proposal. I understand that change can be hard, particularly when it impacts upon your home. However, I agree with the recommendation that the proposal is appropriate in the context of the general residential zone.
Thank you, councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to councillor Burke as mover. Would you like to sum up?
Yeah, I think councillor Dowsley said exactly the point. It's a very appropriate subdivision.
Thank you, councillor Burke. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.6 is planning permit application PP 230199 for 45 Andrews Lane, Yakandanda. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council issues a notice of decision to refuse to grant planning permit for the use and development of a second dwelling in the rural living zone and for a 2-lot subdivision in the rural living zone and bushfire management overlay of 45 Andrews Lane, Yakandanda on the following grounds. Failure to provide required information. The applicant has chosen not to provide information that is essential in the assessment of the subject application, in particular the documents required by the bushfire management overlay. Inconsistent with the current development plan, the proposal is not generally in accordance with the currently approved development plan for the land and in accordance with clause 43.042 of the Indigo planning scheme, a permit cannot be granted. The currently approved development plan for the land is unable to be amended to facilitate the proposed subdivision as the lot averaging provisions under the rural living zone do not allow for any additional lots. And non-compliance with the rural living zone. 3, the proposed subdivision does not comply with the minimum lot requirements of the rural living zone and that the average lot size of 4 hectares is not met. Do I have somebody to move that motion? Moved councillor Shepherd, seconded councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd?
I think it's pretty well stated in the recommendation, but a development plan came to council in 2011 and the development plan and subsequent planning permit relate to a 3-lot subdivision, creating the subject 8.2 hectare lot in addition to 2 smaller 2 hectare lots, and the proposal to create an additional 4th lot is just not consistent with the approved development plan. And I'm assuming because they are aware that it just was not going to fit in with the development plan, they have not provided the bushfire management overlay, which they needed to also submit. So in two places, this is can't be approved.
Thank you, councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn, you were the seconder.
Yes, I don't think there's anything more that needs to be said. Thank you.
Thank you, councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. I understand the proposed subdivision does not comply with the minimum lot requirements of the rural living zone in that the average lot size of 4 hectares is not met when taking into account previous subdivisions within the subject land development plan. However, this averaging provision within the Indigo planning scheme schedule is not consistent with neighbouring shires and does not align with my value of fairness. Wodonga, Alpine, Tawong and Wangaratta all have provision for 2 hectare lot sizes in the rural living zone. By allowing lot sizes to be 2 hectares within the rural living zone, and even within the subject lands development plan itself, as they have 2 other 5 acre or 2 hectare lots previously subdivided, we have set a precedent that this 2 hectare lot size is acceptable for this zone. I feel that disallowing other 2 hectare lots within the zone is inequitable, unfair and unjust. Unfortunately, this particular application has not met a further requirement regarding the bushfire management overlay, and therefore I will concur with the recommendation to refuse on those grounds.
Thank you, councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just echo the comments of councillor Dowsley and say I'm similarly interested in the discussion about lot sizes in rural living zone and making sure that we are checking in to see what our neighbours are doing and also adhering to good and best practice in that area. But as again noted by councillor Dowsley, we really can't entertain an application that hasn't provided information to the assessment of the subject application in relation to the bushfire management overlay. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to councillor Shepherd as the mover. Would you like to sum up? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 11.7 is planning permit application PP 240073 217 Barrenbogie Road, Chiltern. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council issue a notice of decision to refuse a planning permit application PP 240073 for subdivision of land at 216 Barrenbogie Road, Chiltern on the following grounds. 1, the proposal is not consistent with the municipal planning strategy and planning policy framework, particularly clauses A, clause 02031 settlement, B, another clause named natural resource management, C, another clause for housing, D, a clause for protection of agricultural land, E, a clause for subdivision in rural areas. 2, the proposal is not consistent with the purpose and decision guidelines of the farming zone. And 3, the proposal is not consistent with the decision guidelines at clause 65.01 and 65.02. Do I have somebody to move a motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, strategically, we very strongly support farming land in the farming zone. And when we are brought these sort of applications where there's really no discussion around why cutting that 80 hectare land into 240 hectare blocks, how that would be useful agriculturally, then there's really no grounds to support it. The only reason we would cut farming land up is if we had some way of a plan that showed us how that was going to be a better use of that agricultural land. And as it stands, we're better off having an 80 hectare farm than 240 hectares where we don't know why they're breaking it up, and probably they'll want to put houses on them. So again, it does not support our strategic view of very much keeping farming land in farming zone for agriculture.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak as seconder?
Sure. I'll just support Councillor Shepherd's statement there and just agree that this particular proposal has not demonstrated how the proposed subdivision will support or enhance the agricultural production of the land.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to the mover. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to sum up? No. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 12 is Community and Economic Development, and item 12.1 is appointment of councillor representatives to Creative Indigo Strategy Steering Group. The item is for decision, and the recommendation is that council appoints Councillor X and Councillor X as the council representatives to Indigo Shire Creative Indigo Strategy Steering Group, and Councillor X as a substitute representative. Firstly, can I ask for 2 councillor reps and a sub to include in the recommendation? Do we have anybody interested? Councillor Shepherd and Councillor Landells. Is anybody interested in being the sub? Councillor Dowsley. If there's no other interest, then I'll include those 3 councillors in the recommendation and ask somebody to move a motion which includes those 3 names. Councillor Dowsley has moved that. Councillor Harvey has seconded. Councillor Dowsley.
Nothing to add there.
Councillor Harvey, nothing. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, I'm excited to be back in this steering committee, and great to see 2 new councillors with their energy and input. This group has artists, community members, representative people from the community, and really our job is to work with the Creative Indigo strategy that isn't very old. I can't remember, did we do it last year? Anyway, it's quite a new strategy and still needs to be a lot of things implemented. So look forward to working with these councillors and with the different members of the committee on moving forward in that strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Landells.
Yeah. I think Indigo Shire that has such a strong creative community, really right across it. Like I'm a member of Arts Rutherglen, Arts Yakandanda. I'm also involved in Chiltern, and there's a lot of arts activities occur there. And of course, Beechworth Arts Council is really strong, and and the Creative Indigo strategy can perhaps also help to identify opportunities for other communities like Tangambalanga, for example, that area to develop some strong arts projects. But I always think that arts are very much about an expression of our identity as Shire. I think that's such a strong thing. It's a lot more than just nice plays to watch or pictures to look at and that kind of thing. So I think it's really quite deeply ingrained in the soul of Indigo Shire. So I'm really keen to get involved with a whole lot of other creative people on this particular steering group and really help to bring a lot of those key projects in the strategy to fruition.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Councillor Dowsey, would you like to sum up?
No, thank you.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13 is infrastructure services and item 13.1 is road naming of unnamed road off Mellish Street, Beechworth. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 considers the submissions received in response to the public consultation following the December Council meeting and notes the significance of the Chalou family in Beechworth's history, particularly their relevance and connection to the unnamed road off Mellish Street and nearby and adjacent land. 2, endorses the name of Chalou Lane as the name for the unnamed road between 20 and 22 Mellish Street, Beechworth, for the purposes of further community consultation. 3, notes that further community consultation will be conducted in accordance with the naming rules and that feedback or submissions will be received for a period not less than 30 days. 4, adopts the name Chalou Lane in the event that no objections or alternative names are received in response to the consultation by the nominated deadline, or alternatively notes that a further report will be presented to Council at a future meeting to make a decision about the naming of this road. And 5, notes the significant contributions of Kathleen Alderdice in Beechworth's history, but holds the commemorative name Alderdice in abeyance for potential use at a future time. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Horn, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn.
Again, this is gone through due processes and pretty straightforward. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, I would. We're in charge of doing place names, but we very much have government naming rules for places, and they're quite stringent. They're new, they're 2022 statutory requirements, and so we're only just new at this. And we don't very often get to name a lot of roads. So this is us starting a new process, which I imagine will soon become a naming strategy where we will have it very much worked out how we will move forward in naming our roads. This one, we followed the rules and we found a very great name of, sorry, I've got to go down to it, Alderdice. Is that right? Thank you, Alderdice, which was the original recommendation. And she really, again, was an important member of the Beechworth community and was a female and covered all the aspects that we thought would be a really good reflection of an historic person who should be reflected in our area. And we put that name out to the community, and then we got, I think, 15 submissions saying, no, the Chalou family would like to be recognised in that space. So we've now been, that name has been brought to us tonight to, again, it does still fit in with our strict regulations. The Chalou family history, they're very much connected to this community, many generations. And I think, I know people won't agree with me, but when I drive around Indigo Shire, my kids, when they were little, I'd mention a name and they'd all say to me, yep, that's a family. because each time I'd be able to talk about the history of that family in the region over many generations. And I think it's just another opportunity to reflect a name that has significant family connection to Beechworth over many generations. And now this name will go out again for community feedback, and hopefully this will be the name that is decided upon. I think the older Dutch name, we are going to have that, are we, as a name that will be next on our list? Is that what ended up happening? Sorry?
As best possible, councillor. So the recommendation is that we hold it in abeyance and try and use it again immediately in the future wherever we see we can.
Great, thank you. So, and this is going out for, just need a little bit of help here. How many days?
30 days.
30 days, thank you. So the community is asked yet again to give their feedback on the Chalou name.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Sorry. Councillor Horn, did you move the motion and Councillor Shepherd second? Is that correct? Sorry. Thank you. Okay, so
sorry about that.
Did I ask, Councillor Horn, have I asked you to speak to the motion? Yes. And Councillor Shepherd, yes. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I apologise. No. I'd like to say I support the process that we have taken. I really value the community's feedback, both from the Burke Museum to help us get a list of names of women that we should recognise within our community. But I also recognise the fact that, as Councillor Shepherd says, there is value in recognising family names that have been associated with areas for a long period of time, and that is one of the criteria from place names, Geographic Place Names Victoria, I think, is the authority. So I respect the process. I'm very happy to see the outcome, and I also look forward to hopefully recognising Alderdice at a later stage. However, I will say I'm mostly looking forward to a policy. I think it's really appropriate that this council articulates exactly what our expectations are for road naming and how we want to recognise areas of the community, and also to bring it into line with the gender equality strategy and action plan from the Victorian government. So I look forward to that work, as well as hearing the community's feedback on this process. There was one other thing I was going to say, but it's gone. I think that's all. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Horn. Would you like to sum up?
No, I think everything's been said. Thank you.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.2 is Lake Samble Reserve Caravan and Camping Proposed Lease. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council 1 endorses its intention to negotiate a lease for the Lake Samble Reserve Caravan and Camping in Beechworth with the following terms. A 21-year lease term with a suitably experienced caravan park operator. B, the annual rental amount payable will be a commercial amount determined by a competitive process, ideally based on a percentage of the caravan park's annual turnover. C, the lessee will be required to invest into developing the park in line with the adopted master plan. And D, council will similarly be required to commit to funding its share of upgrades required in the master plan. 2, notes that a public notice advising of the proposed lease arrangements will be placed and that submission be received for a period of 28 days in accordance with Council's community engagement policy. 3, endorses the evaluation criteria for the expression of interest process as outlined in this report. And 4, notes that a further report will be presented to Council at a future meeting for a final decision in relation to the proposed lease. Do I have somebody to move that recommendation? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Harvey. Councillor Dowsley.
Yes, I think this is a fairly consistent process with the one that's been undertaken already for the Rutherglen Caravan Park lease renewal, and will also be followed for subsequent leases of camping and caravan parks in the Shire. I just wanted to draw attention to one item in the report, which was the evaluation criteria that's mentioned in the motion, and just highlight that this has changed slightly from the previous lease renewal at Rutherglen. The category for relevant management experience and operating model, which is now 35%, was 25%. Financial benefit to council is now 30%. That was 25% previously. Commitment to investment in line with the master plan is now 25%, which was 40%, and the support of the park vision is unchanged at 10%.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak as seconder?
No, thank you.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd.
Yes, I was wondering whether the Director of Infrastructure Services could speak to the changes in those percentages and the reason for what I'm assuming is an improved process.
Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Thank you. Yes, look, following the expression of interest process we ran last year for the Rutherglen Park, the evaluation panel did a bit of a debrief and reflected on what worked, what we'd do differently, and amongst that was we reflected on the weightings assigned. There was a very high weighting. I think Councillor Dowsley said 40% was against the commitment to invest into the park, and I think it makes sense on a level. But what we found in reviewing the submissions was it's very hard, near impossible, to ask someone to give an absolute investment program for the next sort of 10 or 20 years. So what we found was that each of the submitters was able to give a rigid or a categoric investment program for the early years, and whether that was 2 or 5. But they sort of put conditions on subsequent investment, which makes sense, that our ability to invest in maybe the level 3 priorities, which might be between 5 and 10 years, would be subject to the performance of the park and the economic climate at that time. So look, I think we felt with all of the submissions we got that was a really hard one, and that the weighting of 40% to an item, that people were limited how much they could rigidly commit to it. I think it was just a reflection that could we do those a little bit better? I think with any of those things, in the first instance, you come up with the weightings that you think are right, and sometimes when you road test them, you reflect a little bit differently. And so that was the process. We felt the criteria themselves were appropriate, but we just made that little adjustment in the weightings and felt that would give, with the same process, just a slight better ability to use the criteria to put the best recommendation forward to council.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
Director Ellett, could you please discuss the differences in the nominated percentage of annual revenue that's expected in this process?
Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Yeah, sure. So there's nothing in this report. I suppose what this report does is seeks council to support a position of going to the market and negotiating on the back of an expression of interest process, a lease, and we would be asking respondents to that expression of interest process to nominate what rental they would be prepared to pay, ideally as a percentage of the park's turnover. So in the expression of interest documents themselves, I think in the last one in 2024 nominated a range of 12 to 20% as being typically what we thought we should expect from that expression of interest process. Respondents weren't bound by that. We could have got some over and above that if they wanted to win the tender. We could have got them under, and I can't remember the spread of prices we got. With this one, we have sought guidance from consultants working in the industry to advise us on rentals, and the suggestion for this one is that we might expect to receive something in the range of 16 to 24%. So look, that's what will be in our expression of interest document for council when we go back to the master plans and the level of investment. Council over the life of this master plan would be required to invest a whole lot more than Rutherglen, for example. So return on investment would be one of the keys. But at the end of the day, it's a competitive process, and everyone who responds, it's totally in their court. What they're willing to put forward as their submitted rental valuation.
So it lies with them.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Horn, for your question. Did you want to speak to the motion as well, or not at this stage? Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Shepherd, you've already spoken.
I have a
about the
question.
Mhm.
Yep. I know that all of our caravan park operators are highly regarded within their community, and I know the question is often, why won't we just roll this over to a competent and well-managed managers? They're doing a good job. Why don't we just roll this over? So I'm just asking, I mean, I know the answer, but I just think it's something that should be raised, the reason why we are going out for tender.
CEO?
Thank you, councillor, and through you, Mayor Price. These leases are highly valuable financial assets really to anybody, and it's really the responsibility of council to ensure a number of things. One is that we get the best return for ratepayers. Secondly, that there's an open and competitive tendering bid. So a lease, just similar to any other contracts where we give suppliers the opportunity to bid for business and secure lucrative contracts with council, should go to a full open market. And it's pretty, there's no particular reason why any one party should get exclusive access to that sort of contract without others having the opportunity to do that. I understand in these cases, people have bought into these businesses throughout the life of the existing lease, which may have changed hands a number of times. But there's no real reason why the last person standing at the end of the lease should then have exclusive rights to another lease, which is a 21-year lease, and once granted is worth a lot of money. So really, it's appropriate in a council environment that those things be put out to the market.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd just like to ask a question, please, of the CEO. When these leases are granted and the new lessee decides they want to sell, is there any given time limits on that?
Well, each lease is different, but generally there's no time limit requirements on them. So they are free to on-sell the lease to anybody else and assign it to somebody else. I think we may have a say in it, but I don't believe we would unreasonably withhold permission for that to happen. So they're fairly free to pass this on to somebody else, provided we're happy with it and we're satisfied that they are capable of operating the lease going forward. They would, though, pick up the obligations of the current lease. So where they're obliged to invest over a period of time, then the next person would also be required to do that as well, because they pick up the same obligations in the lease.
Director of Infrastructure Services, Ian Ellett.
Sorry, just to add to that, so I support what the CEO has said. They're all Crown leases, so all of our leases require Crown consent, so we do that through DECA. So yeah, if an operator wants to sell their business to someone else, they do need support through council and then through DECA to be able to take on that lease.
Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I would just like to say through the last lease process that was conducted with the previous council, we were really squarely focused on a good, solid process, and we would be expecting the same of our staff in conducting this next process. And I think that this council has certainly made that known and made that clear, and I think that we are guided by a strong document in the Caravan Parks Master Plan, but I also appreciate the independent advice that we go out to seek to make sure that these leases are appropriate and are really good practice documents. And as I say, that is the expectation that we have for these processes. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Dowsley as the mover. Would you like to sum up, Councillor Dowsley?
No, I think we've covered everything, nothing further to add.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 13.3 is contract 2223/2902 construction of Barmetha Park sports nets. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council 1 awards contract number 2223/02902 for the construction of Barmetha Park sports nets to Idwala Proprietary Limited. 2 discloses the contract price of contract 2223/02902. 3 notes the additional grant amount of $150,000 from Beechworth and District Community Bank and the additional $20,000 offered by the Beechworth Wanderers Cricket Club is contingent on delivering the roof structure with the practice nets facility. 4 notes that a budget adjustment has been included in the Q2 forecast final report earlier in this agenda in the mid-year budget review to accommodate the budget shortfall and project contingencies with the increase in budget funded from identified savings elsewhere in capital works budget. 5 authorises the CEO to sign and seal the contract documents, and 6 authorises the CEO, the financial delegation, to approve contract variations up to a total of 10% of the contract of the signed contract value. To have somebody to move that motion. Moved Councillor Landell, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Landells.
Yes, I'd just like to give my support to this project because for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's a high priority project from the Barmetha Park Master Plan, and also acknowledge that the cricket club have put in $40,000 of their own funds, and they've sourced grants of $180,000 as well. I think in my knowledge of these sort of things, that's really quite exceptional. And from reading the material, it's quite necessary for them to have a roof for these training nets. So on that basis, I think it should be supported. Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder? Thank you, Councillor Burke. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. I am extremely frustrated by the status of this project. In 2022, council completed construction of 4 new cricket training nets at Rutherglen with a project budget of $188,000 and a council contribution of $30,000. In 2023, council completed construction of 3 new cricket training nets at Barnawatha with a project budget of $170,000 and a council contribution of $64,000. In the 2022-23 budget, council endorsed construction of 4 cricket training nets at Beechworth with a project budget of $375,000 and a council contribution of $225,000, which today in our earlier agenda item has been revised to approximately $600,000 total project budget with a council contribution of $280,000. Not only does this project budget beg a belief it could build a house for $600,000, it hardly seems equitable to our community at Yakandanda, who in their 2024 adopted Yak Sports Park Master Plan were told the cost for their high priority cricket net project would be $90,000. That's less than 15% of the total project budget of Beechworth. Unfortunately, at this point in the project, and I do acknowledge the fantastic work that the Beechworth Cricket Club have done in fundraising for their project, it would likely cost more to stop and revise the scope to get the project back into budget than it would be to continue on with the project as it is. So I reluctantly support this motion, but I think we need to do better in the future. I think we need to budget our projects better. I think we need to manage scope better. And I think we need to make sure that we're providing equitable funding across our communities.
Thank you, Councillor Dowsley. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Landells. Would you like to sum up?
Probably the only other thing that I would add, I've sort of made the points about it being a high priority in the master plan for Barmouth Park, and also, the quite extraordinary grant funds that I agree with Councillor Dowsley. It is a very expensive project, but a lot of that has been sourced through the initiative of the cricket club. And I do note that this project has already been delayed by a few years, so or a couple of years at least. So, as we all know, with all these things, further delays only really increase costs. So I think it's important to get this one done.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.1 is the Audit and Risk Committee Performance Survey for 2023-24. The item is for decision, and the recommendation is that Council receive the results of the 2023-24 Audit and Risk Committee Performance Survey. Can I have somebody to move a motion? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Burke. Councillor Harvey.
I don't think it needs any discussion. Thank you.
Councillor Burke, would you like to speak as seconder?
No comment required.
Okay, I might just make some comments. I've been on the Audit and Risk Committee in the whole time that I've been on council. I think it's really good practice of the Audit and Risk Committee to go back to them and ask them to do a survey on their own performance. It gives good indication to the organisation of what the committee might be lacking or what they might need to successfully fulfil their role. The performance survey this year demonstrated that the Audit and Risk Committee have successfully met the responsibility and accountabilities of the role, and there are opportunities for improvement that have been identified and that'll build on the activities that are already occurring. We really highly value the skill and expertise of this group, and we will always look for opportunity to support them in the important function that they provide to council. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Otherwise, I'll go back to Councillor Harvey. Would you like to sum up? I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.2 is CEO employment and remuneration policy. The item is for decision. CEO, you have a conflict of interest with 14.2.
Well said, Madam Mayor. You got some spot on. Council, I have a conflict of interest in this particular item because it relates, material conflict of interest relates directly to my employment arrangements.
Thank you, CEO. We'll wait for you to exit the chamber and we will invite you back in at the end of the debate. The recommendation is that Council endorses the CEO employment and remuneration policy for public exhibition for a period of 30 days from the 26th of February to the 28th of March 2025 and endorses the recruitment process for an independent member of the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee. Can I have somebody to move a motion? Councillor Shepherd, you'd like to move the motion? Can I have a seconder? Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd.
So the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee, and the reason why we're laughing for those watching at home is because I had said that we might get that, say that incorrectly, remuneration, and it happened. So there was no that's what the laughing was about. So the CEO Employment and Remuneration Committee was established while I've been on council, and there's a choice of just having a couple of councillors and an independent member on that committee, but we all decided we'd be on it. We all want to have feedback on recruitment, appointment, performance monitoring and remuneration of the CEO. We have updated that policy. We've done a number of meetings with an independent member and also a consultant speaking to us, where we did a lot of work on how we should change that policy, and those changes are part of this document. We are also looking to recruit a new independent member, where we would like that independent member to be able to chair the meetings as well. So that's a new process that we'll be conducting. So the CEO's performance is assessed against key performance indicators, and that's something that we also do a lot of work on. That committee gets together regularly and we look at the KPIs and we change them accordingly to how we would like to see our CEO direct the workforce and the projects. So we are very hands-on in developing those KPIs, and it's a very good process. And that poor man has to then sit in front of all of us and speak to all of the KPIs that we have developed. And this report will go out to the community. I'm just not sure what the timeline is around that. Thank you. So it will go out for 30 days for review.
Thank you.
And can I just also say, he passed very well.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landells, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, I just think that it's, I've sat in on the process for the first time a couple of weeks ago. It's certainly an extremely intensive and formal process. And I think it's really appropriate that, I mean, I'm sure we're required to do it anyway, but the fact that it's going out to the community for scrutiny is an important part of transparency and governance.
Thank you, Councillor Landells. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? I'd just say that it's really important that we do have this policy because there's lots of legislative requirements that we need to meet, and we also need to reflect that we have really strong governance practices in managing the CEO's employment, performance and remuneration. It's a role that was added to this committee not that long ago, the role of the independent member. And it's a role that we need to be really clear about what we're seeking in terms of the input into that committee. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I just would like to reflect that in no way is this a reflection on the independent member that we've had who has given us great feedback and input. It's just that the role has changed from our perspective. After 2 years of us, yes, with this process. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We'll now get the CEO back in for the next item. (14.3) Council Action Plan 2024-25 Quarter 2 Progress Report. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that Council notes the Quarter 2 2024-25 Council Action Plan Progress Report. Can I have somebody to move that motion? Councillor Shepherd, seconded by Councillor Landells. Councillor Shepherd.
So this is the second last a report from the old council plan. We've already been doing, we already had 2-day event where all the councillors and staff worked on looking through the community feedback on what they see as a next council plan. These are all the old things that we had in our previous one. 67 actions are on track, 8 actions are completed and 1 action is on hold. The 1 action on hold is the looking at the extending the bike trail from Osmond's Flat to Huon. That might end up in the new council plan. That's yet to be discussed. And the 67 actions that are on track, I'm assuming there'll be a process where we look at those and decide whether they will be moved across into the new council plan as well. But yeah, there's probably not a lot of interest in this from the new councillors. This is really our old plan that we're just finishing off.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yeah, look, I think the chart that's been produced here to track the progress is handy, but like a lot of these things, it's we really need to see how that progresses throughout the year. So hopefully we'll see more of the green and a bit less of the yellow, orange, whatever it is, as the year progresses. But yeah, so it'll be what it'll be. We'll just monitor it as the year progresses.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up?
I think one thing we did raise about this document for the new council was to have a closing of the loop so that we could see from what strategy these actions came from. And I think that will be a useful addition to, yes, I can see some nodding. There's been discussion about how to make this a better register for the new council. So there'll be, I imagine, a fair bit of discussion about how to make this relevant to the new council.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.4 is advisory committee minutes. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council receives the attached unconfirmed meeting minutes for the following advisory committees and endorses the officer recommended actions. 1, Finance Committee, 2, Indigo Environment Advisory Committee, and 3, Indigo. Can I have somebody to move that motion? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Landels. Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak to it?
Yes, I'd like to speak specifically to the Indigo committee meeting that I attended, where we were looking at strategic issues really around economic development, and it was raised and supported that it would be good to know what other councils adjoining us are planning, especially around economic development and planning issues, so that we could have that on our radar. So I see that staff will commence discussions with neighbouring councils about actioning that MOU.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Landels, would you like to speak as seconder?
Yes, thanks. So I think these certainly the Indigo Environment Advisory Committee and Indigo incorporate some really talented and experienced people from the community. They have really strong and robust input and opinions, which I think really adds to the value of those committees. I'm on the Indigo committee, and I think that I've sort of seen that one firsthand, only one meeting, but I'm really looking forward to continuing to work with that group of people on, I believe this year, we've got a new economic development strategy that's got to be developed. And I think it's going to be incredibly important going forward for, there's all sorts of financial challenges out there and pressures on council, and the more, I guess, we can find sustainable ways to generate strong economies. We use this word thriving economies a lot, but that really is the kind of work that we need to be able to do with Indigo to try and put those words into action.
Thank you, Councillor Landels. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Horn.
One of the actions is for the staff to open discussions with neighbouring councils about actioning Indigo recommendations. And I think it's really important that we talk not only to the normal Taiwan Council and other local councils to us, but also adjoining councils such as Wodonga, particularly in relationship to the development of projects at the Logic Centre and other activities that abut our lands that of course impact on how we develop and grow and succeed. So, and I'm thinking about shared facilities like with the Federation Council with their swimming pool. There are a lot of people that go over and use that resource for us. And I think that interaction with the other shires is really, really going to be important too.
Thank you, Councillor Horn. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? If not, I'll go back to Councillor Shepherd. Would you like to sum up? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.5 is informal meetings of councillors' records. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council accepts the attached informal meetings of councillors' records. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Dowsley, seconded Councillor Horn. Councillor Dowsley, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, this is just really administrative to get those records. There's nothing really else to say.
Thanks, Councillor Dowsley. Councillor Horn, would you like to speak as seconder? No? You wouldn't like to sum up, Councillor Dowsley?
I think we've said it.
I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.6 is amendments to council meeting schedule 2025. The item is for decision. The recommendation is that council moves the 24th of June 2025 scheduled council meeting to the 23rd of June 2025, one day earlier. Do I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Harvey, seconded Councillor Shepherd. Councillor Harvey, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, I think it was explained earlier, that's about a local government conference giving us an opportunity to attend, so I don't think there's anything controversial about that. Thank you.
Councillor Shepherd, would you like to speak as seconder? No. If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. Item 14.7 is contracts awarded under Chief Executive Officer Delegation 27th of October 2024 to the 31st of January 2025. The item is for information. The following contract was awarded by the CEO under delegation between the values of 250,000 and 500,000 between the 27th of October 2024 and the 31st of January 2025. There is one contract listed. Item 15 is notices of motion, and there are none. Item 16 is councillors' report. Would any councillor like to make a report to the February meeting? Councillor Landells.
Yeah, thank you. I'd like to give an update on an event that I attended on the 31st of January at Yakandanda. It was hosted by Mika Bosland, and she's a 19-year-old person from the Beechworth Stanley area. She's a musician and a songwriter, and she was launching a video clip for a song she had written. But the main thing that she had done was, or a couple of things, she hosted a panel. I should say Mika is an openly queer person, and she's quite a strong leader within the queer community here in North East Victoria with Indigo Shire. So she applied for funding through Midsummer, and Youth Affairs Council Victoria, and to produce this film clip. But the thing that I found quite fascinating and really I thought quite groundbreaking was she conceived and hosted a 4-member panel of young people who were giving insights into the queer experience and journey in rural regional Victoria. And I was incredibly proud to be part of a shire that had a young person who felt confident enough and empowered enough to, and mature enough at 19 to be able to conduct that discussion. And I think it says a lot about the support that she's had. Like, she's a credit to herself and her family, but I also want to make mention of she's been for a few years a member of our youth activity group, I think, or youth action group they're called, YAG, and with the leaders from Shire, Lou and Jess, people like that. Jess was present at this event too, just to give moral support. But what they do really well is empower young people to take the reins and do things. And I've seen this a few times in practice, and yeah, it's really impressive. But like I say, really, I think it's a great thing that we're developing really fine young people and leaders.
Thank you, Councillor Landells, for making that report to the meeting. Any other councillors like to make a report to the meeting? Yes, I would like to update the community and the council on the hospital advocacy that we've been doing. Obviously, you'll be aware through our weekly update that we've been advocating for a new hospital on a new site for Albury-Wodonga Health for quite some time now. that advocacy has taken a number of forms. We've been meeting collectively with about 17 councils. We've written to ministers. They have written to ministers. That's fallen on deaf ears, or we've had responses that have been completely unsatisfactory. We also held a tri-council meeting in August of last year, which feels like a lifetime ago because it predates this council. And just yesterday, we received a response from the minister in relation to that meeting. That meeting was about bringing 3 councils together to show a really strong position as a collective. It was the first meeting of its kind. There was some really strong collaborative efforts from the people that attended that meeting to explain the situation for and the impact on our small shires. And to think that it took some 6 months for us to get a response from the Health Minister, I think shows us really clearly why we will be marching on the steps of Parliament next Wednesday. We're being treated with complete disregard on this issue when the evidence is so clear, and the state government's own evidence from their 2021 Clinical Services Master Plan, which identified itself a new site for a new single site hospital is what's required for Albury Wodonga Health. They keep telling us that they'll keep moving with their plans for the current redevelopment, which we know will be significantly underutilised by our community and not service us into the future exactly as we need. So as they will continue down that path, so will we continue with our advocacy, and I'm really excited to see the level of interest for next Wednesday to march on Parliament. We have 4 of our councillors attending on the day, as well as some staff, as well as community, and as I say, lots of our neighbouring shire councils. The support continues to amaze me, and I think that the state government should be wary, because this is some of the best collaboration this region has seen on a really important issue, and we will not go away. We will keep coming to discuss this and to really hold the state government to account for what should be a new single site hospital and is currently a seriously underdone refurbishment on the current site. Does any other councillor want to make a report to the meeting? Item 16.1 is the Mayor's Diary with activities from the 1st of September to the 26th of October 2024. The decisions register is item 17. Any comments or questions? That's for information. Item 18 is general business. Does anyone have any general business for the council meeting? Councillor Horn.
As usual, I'd like to ask for an update on the Main Street, Rutherglen, please.
CEO.
Thank you, Councillor Horn, through you, Mayor Price. No, we have not received any further updates since the last council meeting in regards to any public announcements or any indication when any works might start there from Department of Transport and Planning Ministers, Council. So I've got nothing further to report on that.
Thank you, CEO. Any other general business for the council meeting? Councillor Dowsley.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, I'd like to apologise for stepping out a couple of times. My family managed to lock themselves out of the house, so I had to give them my key. So apologies for that. I'd like to request a briefing on the process for requesting changes to the planning scheme.
CEO, happy to accommodate that. Thank you. Any other items for general business for the council meeting? No. Item 19 is confidential, and Section 66 of the Local Government Act states that a council or delegated committee must keep a meeting open to the public unless the council or delegated committee considers it necessary to close the meeting to the public because of a circumstance specified in subsection 2. The circumstances are the meeting is to consider confidential information as defined in Section 3 of the Local Government Act, B, for security reasons, or C, it is necessary to do so to enable the meeting to proceed in an orderly manner. I've got a recommendation that the council meeting be closed to the public in accordance with Section 66 of the Local Government Act 2020. Can I have somebody to move that? Moved Councillor Shepherd, seconded Councillor Harvey. All those in favour? Carried unanimously. We will now move into confidential session. We've just moved a motion to move back out of confidential session, and that is to end the meeting. So I would declare the meeting closed at 9:01 p.m. The next meeting with council is Tuesday, the 25th of March, 2025 at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.